Today, we are diving into the absolutely wild story of the Schwerer Gustav, a weapon so unbelievably massive, it's forever known as the gun that was too big.
So let's set the stage. Right before World War II, the German High Command was wrestling with a massive problem. A question that seemed almost impossible to answer. How do you destroy something that's literally built to be indestructible?
And that something was the Maginot Line. I mean, this thing was a beast. A sprawling, state-of-the-art fortress of concrete and steel that France built thinking it was absolutely positively impenetrable. Hitler knew that if he was going to invade France, he needed a key, or maybe just a giant hammer, to smash right through it.
Well, the answer they came up with was just an unbelievable piece of engineering. In 1934, the German arms company Krupp got to work designing a weapon on a scale nobody had ever seen before, a true behemoth.
And this was the result, the Schwerer Gustav. Let's be perfectly clear about this. This was, and still is, the single largest, heaviest artillery gun ever built by humans. Nothing before or since has even come close.
To try and wrap your head around that, let's talk numbers. The whole system weighed 1,350 tons. That's what? The same as about 200 full-grown elephants? Just imagine that.
And what did this thing fire? Well, each and every shell, whether it was the concrete-piercing one or the high-explosive one, weighed a staggering 7 tons. The shell itself weighed more than an elephant,
And it could launch that 7-ton shell an incredible distance, 47 kilometers, or about 29 miles. Think about that. It could hit targets that were way over the horizon, totally invisible to the crew. On paper, this thing was the ultimate weapon.
So, you might be wondering, how in the world do you move something this massive? Well, the Gustav was what's known as a railway gun. It was built onto a custom-trained chassis. But it couldn't just ride on normal tracks. Oh no, it needed its own special parallel tracks to be built for it. And get this, it needed a curved section of track just to aim left or right.
And that little detail perfectly captures the weapon's fatal flaw. For all of its jaw-dropping power, the Schwerer Gustav was an absolute logistical nightmare. Its incredible size was both its greatest strength and its most crushing weakness.
I mean, just getting the gun ready to fire was a monumental task. First, you had to lay those special parallel tracks. Then you needed giant cranes running on another separate set of tracks just to piece the weapon together. The whole process took a crew of 250 men, 3.5 days, and all that time, it was just a giant sitting duck needing its own anti-aircraft battalions for protection.
The amount of manpower this thing soaked up was just astounding. You had the 250 guys assembling it, you had another 2,500 men just to lay the tracks. By the time it was actually used at the Siege of Sevastopol, it took a mind-boggling 4,000 people to operate and protect this one single weapon.
So this really gets to the heart of the problem, right? The promise was this incredible super gun that could shatter any defense from nearly 30 miles away. But the price, the reality, was this enormous, slow, incredibly vulnerable operation that just drained an unbelievable amount of resources.
Which brings us to the big question. What's the final verdict? With all that power and all those problems, what was the actual impact of the Schwerer Gustav? Was it really a super weapon after all?
Well, its career was short, and kind of ironic, actually. It was designed specifically to smash the Maginot Line, but it wasn't even ready until 1941, long after France had already fallen. Its only real moment in the sun was at the Siege of Sevastopol in 1942. And by 1945, with the war lost, its own creators destroyed it so it wouldn't fall into enemy hands.
Yeah, its service record was pretty thin. After Sevastopol, it got moved to Leningrad, but that attack got called off. There was a second gun, called Dora, that was sent towards Stalingrad, but it was pulled back almost immediately. Turns out the barrel wore out so fast it constantly needed to be replaced, and some crazy idea for a self-propelled version was probably wisely scrapped.
You know, when you boil it all down, the final verdict is pretty clear. As this quote says, the Schwerer Gustav was just fundamentally impractical. The massive resources it ate up just weren't worth its very limited impact on the battlefield. So, we're left with this fascinating question. Was the Gustav a terrifying weapon of war, or just a colossal waste of resources? I mean, there's no denying it was an absolute marvel of engineering, pushing the very limits of what was thought possible. But was it an effective weapon? Or was it just a monumental, impractical ego project? What do you think?